Hello, everybody. Welcome to my session on this late Friday afternoon. I almost didn't make it myself, so I appreciate you being here. Today we are going to talk about scaling e-commerce and transactional systems. But first, let me introduce myself just very quickly. My name is Füsun Wehrmann. I'm a techie and a manager for quite a while. I worked in several positions in both disciplines, and right now I'm working for OLX as VP Engineering. We have a very cool tech hub with over 130 people, and I think 80–90% of these people are techies. Our company is also not very much known. The bigger group, Naspers, is really big in the top 10 internet companies in the world, like Alphabet, Microsoft big in terms of financial power, I guess, and OLX is like eBay Kleinanzeigen in Germany. And we are active in 40 countries with more than 17 brands and billions of impressions every month, over 300 million devices worldwide. So we have some traffic and we have some interesting things going on over the world. So when I think about e-commerce systems, there's one thing I really don't understand, or that is strange to me, is that when I came from university, fresh from the university, around 1999, e-commerce systems look like this. Internet cloud or some other service, desktop computer, and then you have like bloop, an application somewhere running, and a database. And if you are very fancy, you had some tracking or third-party integration. And year 2017, 2018, a typical e-commerce system, we are not talking about Amazon or Otto, a typical, usual e-commerce system looks like this. You see the difference? Not really much. There is a lot of mobile traffic going on, and people are now mobile first on everything. But at the end, how the systems look, it didn't change so much. And why? Because if you look at the statistics, today a biggish e-commerce site is handling traffic which equals to the global world traffic 10 years ago. And we have much more features, we have much more people connecting online, and yet our systems still look like this. But of course, with all this functionality and things going on, inside this nice blue box, the things look quite different. Something like this. And let's be honest, no matter where you work, there is some monolith in your cellar somewhere in your company. Maybe it's a legacy system, maybe it's a back office system with 5 users, or it's something that is that has no importance to business. We don't have the resources to invest in it, whatever, all good reasons. But everybody has some kind of spaghetti monolith on one server running. And usually, nobody cares about it, basically, unless there is a fundamental problem somewhere. So my personal experience is nobody cares about it, and then suddenly there is really something wrong with the system, with the company, KPIs, revenue, you name it, and you start hearing the term scaling, architecture over and over, and from strange people, For example, the cute marketing guy comes like, I think we need high availability. And if you talk to him, actually, it's about the uptime problems, that you are down too much and we are losing our face for the customers, or we are worried we cannot handle more, or a product guy comes like, figure out how we can go 100x, because they have big plans. They don't have the traffic yet, no idea about it, what they mean, but 10x, 100x. And that might be a new category they're launching, going to a new country, market, or they're not telling you, but Saturday evening there is a TV ad being broadcasted, and you will indeed get 10x more traffic for half an hour. Stuff like this. So it is really important to understand what the people mean behind scaling. When you talk to developers, it's basically like, we want to do new stuff, cool stuff. And first of all, people don't let us use the new technology languages. And even if they do, then we cannot get it to the production. It takes ages to get a cluster, And they all talk about scalability issues. And there is also, there is also the poor CTO or technical leader in some companies, and they are desperately looking for a reason to convince the business to go to the cloud. And then they also use the scalability card for, excuse me, let's go to cloud. When we look at the users, customers, this study is from 2017, I think it's, if at all, it got more challenging. For an e-commerce site, if your page loading or response time, loading time is under 3 seconds, forget about it, You just don't need to launch that feature, your product anymore. And if you look into the depth of it, everything under 100 milliseconds is just there, instant. Everything up to 1 second is good enough for many people. It's also the AMP, performance accelerated mobile pages from Google. And between 1 and 3 seconds, lots of things going on, and you should try to stay there, and over 3 seconds, no way. If you look at the statistics, however, this is also, I think, from 2018, yes? Okay, it's not the Amazon, Google, big guy statistics, but in general, in whatever industry you look at, the numbers don't look good. So why? Do we all suck as techies and we don't know how to deal with our systems and technology? What's going on there? There's a very nice book about scalability. Usually I don't pitch for books, but I really like this one. And there also you see the sentence, if you have a crisis resulting from scalability, it's hardly about just technology. That's why I want to, before we go into some depths of theory of scaling, I want to talk about these topics as well. So, if you want to scale, what are you dealing with? Basically, three topics: people, processes, and technology. And I will shortly comment on these topics, but before we do anything, I want to warn you, first of all, about overdoing things. Because people, basically techies, we have a tendency to create solutions that are super cool, super scalable, super technical, and that can easily go behind the needs of business requirements. At least we should do it consciously. When we talk about process, I think everybody has some experiences around that. They can easily become bureaucratic and unnecessary and, just not helpful. And technology, if you overdo it, that might actually slow you down and make things more complicated. So people, this is a very cheesy slide, I know, right things, right people at the right place, but basically this is about if you are looking at a system and you want to scale that system because you want to scale your business, you are scaling everything. How about your organization? Have you ever looked at it? If you are going to build a system for 10x more transactions or traffic, can you add up easily people to your teams, or can you scale them down easily? if you look at the structures, do you think your current structures and organization going to help you or going to be a problem? I think these are questions that matter a lot, and that also underlines the importance of technical leadership when you are dealing with such problems. Processes, again, you know, we can talk a lot about it. Open a bottle of wine and talk about processes. And it's usually boring, no matter what, but basically it's about decisions and execution. Who is deciding for what? What is the way of getting to decisions, and how good, how fast are we executing those? And processes are good, normally, if they're helping you, if they are functioning, if they get you rolling. And sometimes they don't, they're blocking us. And in terms of architecture and scaling, I think DevOps and automation are two things where you should make your homework first before you go into the next train of reactive microstructure, reactive architectures and microservices. One example, so also processes are a context-driven issue. So when you have a process and you look at it, you cannot say if it's good or wrong. It depends on the type of product you have, how many customers you have, if you're global, not global. It depends on the case. For example, if your site is down and you are a startup, what happens? It's maybe 10 people, 20 people startup, and if you're lucky, you got a pager, you got a message, and if you're maybe a friend of you told you, hey, you know, you seem to be down, and you just figure out a way to fix it. Maybe you know the problem, maybe you don't. And after all is fixed, you send, I don't know, blog or send a tweet or mail to your users, and that's how you deal with incidents, problems in your system. If you're a big global enterprise, being down is a big issue. Being down 5 minutes could be 5 million, or I don't know, maybe your share value drops. So probably there are multiple processes running in parallel, and there are teams taking care of it and opening channels and handling it. And for many companies, it's an overkill. We don't like that. For lots of other companies, that's what you need. That's what I mean by context. So if you are scaling up your company system, you should find a balance where you think, okay, this is good enough. And please tell me, if you never had this problem in your life, processes should not be over people. Sometimes they took such control of people that comes in between the way collaboration between two people. And I think this is one of the things we should be very careful about, that processes do not dictate how we work. Technology, so finally getting to real stuff. One thing about technology is, especially when we're about scaling, it's like investment, doing new things, doing more things. For many non-tech people, product, CEO, finance, it's hard to understand what we really actually mean. And when we tell them things, they cannot easily relate sometimes what impact we are going to make on the business. And let's be honest, the most difficult thing is sometimes a problem is quite trivial. We just need to get some resources, work on it, and it's done. I don't know, a database migration or a sharding, you know, an easy one. Or sometimes it's a big thing, it's a big refactoring, it's a big world change, and it's damn hard, and with lots of uncertainties. And my experience is that techies are responsible for flagging these risks and how complex the situation is and what that investment means for the company in terms of opportunities and risks. And yeah, technology, actually it's not so difficult to build nice scalable systems today if it wasn't with the legacy code we are running on our systems. Um, Once again, to wrap it up, we should always remember business people, they don't really care, they also talk about DevOps and all these things, but they don't really care about how we do things. They do care about what comes out of our actions, our work. And I want to give you, for example, an example or a cheat list. If you're talking about architecture, a new architecture, working on your monolith and going to a microservices architecture, for example, there you need a story around cost and speed of change. Maybe you can go and calculate how many cents a transaction costs for your company or per daily active user. Or you can look at centralization, standardization stories. And when it comes to quality, don't go with your code coverage statistics, but maybe use user-related satisfaction data. And then maybe it makes sense for them. And in an agile company where you have product teams going with Kanban and Scrum, if you are doing an architectural change, we are talking about agile architecture. And I talked to a couple of people who are working as architects or in these roles or in the teams, what it means for them. They said, basically, it means for me, just like in software development, one step at a time. Doesn't matter how big you are, how big plans you have, you should be doing one change at a time. And the second thing is, there is a notion of getting the guru, architecture guru, or a group of people, and then giving them the information about your system, and then they figure out with their endless know-how what you should do in terms of architecture, and they drop it on your lap and they go. Or they leave it to the team and expect you to implement that. So that is something that almost never, leads to success. So it's important that the team who owns the code, who owns the system, drives the whole action. It's okay to have external help. It's okay to listen to people, get training, fail, get even instructions from them. But a team should drive these efforts. DID, dream of something big, design it for something in the middle, and implement it for something small, is maybe something you have heard before. That also gives you the notion, having a dream is okay, designing a system for a bigger purpose is okay, but always go for something smaller than in the design. And last but not least, an agile architecture basically means you have means of testing, monitoring, and rolling back your features, or that's as easy as a feature toggle. And most importantly, there is no single point of no return. So I've seen a couple of migrations or architectural, I don't know, it's just a horrible, operation, let's say, and it's like an organ transplant. You couldn't go back after some point. And I believe there is always a chance, there is always a plan. Maybe it involves downtime or some investment. I think this is necessary. Okay, we are good with time. So there is a lot of trade-offs when you're doing this. I think that's also not a big news for you. And I also want to underline buy versus make. So if you are changing, if you are refactoring anything in your system, please do not invent the wheel. Do not try to buy, do not try to make the things that is already out there. Writing a new framework, inventing a new messaging system is really not what you need. This tendency was much bigger, I think 10, 15 years ago. I think today's techies are much better at this. And just imagine if you have a team of 5 and they work for a year. In Germany, it's easily like 400 to 500K expenses for a company. So ask yourself this question, do I really have the right people, and do I really want to invest $500,000 in something that I have to keep maintaining in the next years? So centralization, at least at OLX, is a fundamental question. We always want to think about what are these things that need to be implemented once and offered to everybody else, so that we can scale, we can offer some quality, and we can have some standardization. Just a couple of them could be image processing, messaging, tracking. So this is also when looking at systems, when looking at cost efficiency and scalability, always think about the options that you have that need to happen in one place. Now, this is this is only relevant for big companies, right? If you are really big in 40 countries, 30 countries, and you need kind of standardization and alignment. If you are just German e-commerce shop, I think that might be also an overkill for you. So when we are looking at the systems and scalability options, there is one method, or there is one way of thinking about it. I like it a lot. It's the AKF Scale Cube. AKF is the company that invented it. I really don't know what the real name is, but you have the link there. But basically, they offer you, they say you can look at the systems from 3 different perspectives. If you have a system at the point of 0, 0, 0, let's say a monolith writing to a global data persistency layer and has no scaling, you can go in 3 directions. First, x-axis. That means you can clone that system again and again and again, and make sure that you distribute the work that is equally, take the burden. Second, splitting different things. This is the world of domain-driven development, services, microservices, you name it. Stuff that is responsible for different functionality, you take it out, you carve it out, and make sure you can isolate it in such a way that you can handle it separately. Z-axis, it's the data axis. Most commonly, it means look at the stuff that is similar and try to cut it in vertical slices so you can deal with each piece separately. In today's world, basically, it would mean on the x-axis, load balancer magic in most of the cases. On the y-axis, we have services, microservices, and on the z-axis, splitting, sharding data. So when we go back to our traditional e-commerce system, so what can we do? So let's say I'm running the system and suddenly, I have some success, marketing campaign, I cannot scale. I have a monolith, I don't have time, what do I do? Nice, I'm scaling it horizontally. That means I make a copy of my application, and each part gets some traffic from the load balancer, and I make sure that, in theory, you can scale forever. In practice, not. It's the easiest and cheapest way for scaling a monolith until some certain point. But that doesn't solve the problems with your code. If you have a huge repository, huge code base, your problems with your continuous integration, deployment, and your growing data, it will all be there. If you have a huge database with 300, 400 tables and insane relationships, this is not going to solve your problems. But for many other cases, it's a quick help and you can use it. So, and in most cases, you scale your application, but everybody's writing into the one database. And that becomes a bottleneck very, very quickly. And then you can say, yeah, but, actually, our shop is quite good. It's designed in a quite nicely manner, so we can separate the database according to the countries. Very well, then you are in the world of sharding, which is also a very nice and legit way of scaling your systems. Here we are usually talking about having each market having its own data, just like for example OLX does. India has its own data store and Argentina has its own data store. Sometimes you might want to shard your data according to customer segments. So there are different flavors to it. And at its best, you design it beforehand and distribute your data from the start. If you are on a case, if you have a task to shard your data and slice and dice your big database, I would always urge you to look at your code too. If you are really making the effort and spreading your database into several data stores, please look at your code. Maybe it's a good time for you also, do the same thing in your code base. And the problem about this approach is sharding your data sharding your data doesn't help you with your code base or any problems around that. So if you do this, good idea, very good idea, but it's still a monolith. It's not any better in many ways. So then we come to the third dimension. Why scaling? It's the cool and trendy way of scaling. It's the world of microservices, services. And the idea is actually quite simple and it looks nice. We take our application and we took each functionality out of the system, not only from the code base, also most often the time physically, logically and physically out of the system. Each service has its own data store, is independent, and can be autonomously developed and deployed. And if you do it right, you have a microservices architecture where application and services talk to each other via messaging services or things like that. And yeah, how to split the service is the second thing. So there are two approaches to that. One is like doing it with verbs. The other one is doing it with nouns. I will try to give an example for both. For example, an e-commerce app. So what does a user do? Sign up, log in, buy, get recommendations, things like this. So if you split an e-commerce applications like that, that would be a by-the-book design for the services you have. What you have to be careful about here is shared resources. So even if you split the databases and you split the concerns, there will be data, there will be a need of single point of truth and some transactional consistency, and you have to figure it out how you will fulfill these business requirements. And especially the cost is a very important point here. Imagine in your monolith, you write a record once. A user is created, right? And here in this system, probably a single server is creating some data, and then you have to find a way of publish this, broadcast this to the others, and then that will be signaled to the other microservices, and they will somehow see this or be notified about this and probably take this data and to write to their stores. So you can imagine, instead of writing one record to one database, you are sending around loads of data all the time. So amount of data storage and bandwidth you will need is going to be insanely high, higher than what you have today. So technically, it's not a problem. These resources are available, but you have to check if your budget can also catch up with these requirements. There's also, of course, the possibility to mix these scaling options. That's a best practice, The way the possibilities of scaling doesn't end with microservices or splitting it according to the functions. You can use Xscaling nicely to scale your microservices in your infrastructure. And if you need it, you can even add the third dimension to that and shard your data so that you can really go crazy with scaling. So that was the noun-based scaling for services and functions, let's say. And if you do it by nouns, I just took an example from a social network. Let's say we are writing a new application similar to LinkedIn or Zing. So, and we want to do it not with verbs, but nouns. What would be our structure? We will need some basic networking domain, and then we will have some cool features for our premium users, career jobs, some ads, events, you know, things like that. And it's totally fine, and many companies follow this approach. Now, I'm not really very opinionated about that, but just that you know, some people think that is old-fashioned. Why? Because the new world, the new trend is going through reactive reactive architectures, event-driven design and streams and whatnot. And they thinking in nouns, splitting in nouns, forces you to stay in the world of domains, objects, structures, which is not moving, which is like static. And they like the split according to the functions more because it gives you the possibility in a reactive, functional way. It gives you in the flow. You can program and build systems according to the flow of execution of code and data. So just because the most important part is Y-level scaling services, I want to spend a little bit time more on that. What does it mean really for you? The moment that you say, I'm going to split my monolith into smaller parts, I will do microservices, services, you are entering the world of distributed computing. And distributed computing is very cool. You distribute data, you scale, all of a sudden, lots of things are possible that wasn't possible before, but everything comes with a price. This uncertainty of your system will increase. So you have to build components that can deal with uncertainty on different levels. In the good old world of monoliths, it's just a begin transaction, write, and commit or roll back. That was as easy as that. And in a non-distributed architecture, you have to make sure you have a level of consistency. And the moment you leave a microservice or service scope, everything outside is unknown. The other service might be there, might not be there. Your request for writing data can be successful, not successful. So within a service, you're totally fine, but everything else around you will be full of risks and unknowns. So what makes microservices and services architecture quite promising and scary, and it's not easy. And like we discussed before, it has a direct impact on your organization and architecture. Can you imagine you build a system like this, and your team structure and department structure stays the same? I can't imagine. There is no way of succeeding in such an architecture in the old-fashioned way of organizational structure who is building this. So probably there is going to be consequences of that architecture also in the processes and organization. I think one interesting thing is consistency. E-commerce systems are very transaction-based. So there is this concept of eventual consistency for microservices. That means, you know, there is no guarantee actually that you get the last right when you read something. And for many, many transactional e-commerce systems, that's not acceptable. The other far end of it was, you know, asset properties, relational database, begin transaction, and if you say commit, everything is good. If not, everything is rolled back. So there is also some flavors in between, like casual consistency. I think if you are doing this if you are making this operation on a commercial system, you have to spend a lot of time on your data and its consistency. We talked about it. Trend is towards data-driven architectures and reactive architectures. And it's a little bit overwhelming, I guess, because we were just dealing with microservices and all these event-based communications, and all of a sudden it's much, much more. And it's really cool. I think that's the future, yes. But I just want to warn you, the ramp-up time and the way we work and how we implement the system to get the confidence that we are okay with implementing at a certain speed and deliver certain quality to our customers. I think this is really challenging. It's not easy. So also there are maybe 1 or 2 teams doing small experiments, implementing parts of the system in a gradual manner on a ramp-up fashion would be much, much easier. It's a complex topic, and the more we go into the world of event-driven architectures, reactive systems, the more it gets unnatural to human mind in many ways. And yeah, the drawing boxes like this is really easy, you know, boxes and arrows, but it also gets much, much relevant and difficult to figure out how these arrows work, also technically, which languages, which architectures, is it synchronous, not synchronous, and I/O blocking, not I/O blocking, and all these kinds of many, many parameters on a technical level, they become much, much more important, which was a little bit on a more abstract world a couple of years ago. So, sorry, everybody awake? I just want to show you one example, not one example, just one snapshot of what we do at OLX. So we have 40 countries, 17 brands. That means these brands have people using their mobile phones and sometimes also their desktops. And they do something, you know, post a car, a fashion item, something like that. And we are trying to offer all these brands these services on AWS architecture, mostly developed in Berlin, image service, location service, tracking service, payment and billing service. Actually, one of us was here today talking about that service. And I brought some high-level architecture presentations of these systems, not to explain them in detail for now, but I think it's interesting to relate these drawings to the content in the slides later if you look at the materials. So this is our messaging architecture. The goal of messaging architecture is basically that we make it very easy for everybody to send notifications, SMS and email, that it can scale as much as you want, and we take the burden of negotiation with third-party companies. So no matter what you want, you can just pick your context and send your messages, and the system will handle it for you. And it has several components, even a front end. You can use parts of it, you can use all of it. It's left to you. One thing we do quite well at OLX is our tracking. We have all the data in one place, but the way we collect it, the way the data is collected and put in a general data lake is done quite in a flexible manner. And as you see, we see lots of load balancer based on regions, so lots of X and Z scaling going down there. And our image service is also, in a way, you know, it does look complex, but actually it's simpler than it looks here. So wrapping up, I want to give some real-life advice to close up. Building new applications and systems are always easier. So if you have a chance not to touch legacy, don't touch legacy, even for the sake of scaling. Sometimes it's necessary. And if you are touching a monolith or big, scary system, which is bringing a lot of money core to your business, and you are going to do a big operation, and there is nobody in the team that has this experience. Nobody has done it before. I think this is very risky. So imagine you could be a team of high potential surgeons in the team, but if you are doing an open heart surgery, it's better to have one surgeon with you that has cut open a patient before. Everything about architecture and technology is fine. You can know everything, but you have to know about your application, its functionality, its data, domain know-how. That's why a big warning, just getting a consultant from outside and hoping everything will be fine, I think it's quite risky. And no code talks session and no book, no YouTube video is going to save you from cleaning up your code. When we are talking about scaling in today's world, it has to start with automation and a basic infrastructure. And infrastructure as a code is A of architecture today. So I know many companies are still a little bit struggling with that. But again, before you talk about the next big cool thing in scaling your system, go invest your resources first there if you think you are not, if you don't have the required level yet. If you can go cloud, please go cloud. If you're not doing it, at least try to use some kind of container and orchestration layer so you don't have to invent wheel and you don't have to deal too many problems at the same time. And last but not least, I think fundamentally, there are many options, many beautiful architectures out there you can implement your system with, but most of them will be somehow non-feasible, especially in terms of cost. So you have to, before you just prototype something and made a point of proof of concept, and then figure out that this will exceed your company's budgets in 3 months when you deploy it on production, I think it's always good investment to work with necessary people to see what it would mean for you before you do too much. I think I'm good with time. And thank you for being here on a Friday with me. If you have questions. No questions? Yes, questions? Okay. Yes?
Regarding your, you showed in the beginning a slide regarding the average loading time for different industries and different countries. Do you by chance know how OLX is doing in this?
OLX?
OLX, yeah.
I know some very good numbers from some countries, and I know some really scary numbers from other countries. So I think it really depends on which OLX brand you're talking about. I think our Polish site is quite good. And the other countries, depending on the platform, sometimes struggling. But for sure, we don't have any website that is there in 1 second. But hopefully, like around 3 or 5 seconds, we are there. Was it a control question? So he's working at OLX. Do you know the numbers?
No, I only work on this bus models.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. I just have one last question. Who has a monolith at work from this? Oh, okay, okay. So I hope it was somehow relevant for your work, guys. If you want to catch up later or have questions or critiques on my talk, I'm happy to digitally connect with you through LinkedIn or Twitter anytime. Thank you. Have a nice weekend.